Alright, I was recommended to post this here. I hope it's the right place, and that I can get some kind of answer as to what the hell happened to me. I'm not really sure where to start, so I guess I'll just get straight into it. Yesterday, when I was cleaning my room, something caught my attention out of the corner of my eye. Outside of my window, I saw a car pulling out of our driveway, but that's not what caught my attention. It was the fact that it was my car. Now, at first, I wasn't too weirded out, because at the time my mom was still home, and she sometimes uses it if her car isn't working or somebody else is using hers. I was getting ready to wave at her to say goodbye when I saw who was driving the car. My heart immediately sunk into my stomach, and I got a really horrible panicked feeling. It felt like I couldn't breathe. It felt almost like I had just dropped from reality, and everything seemed so fake. After just a few seconds of staring in absolute shock, just before the other me had fully pulled out at the driveway, they slammed on the brakes and looked up at the window. At me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, so I immediately ran downstairs as fast as I could and ran outside. As I went out the door, I felt like I got punched in the stomach. After a few seconds of standing there and catching my breath, I decided to check. My car was still parked in the driveway, like nothing ever happened. I wasn't completely sure if what had happened had actually happened, so I sat down outside on the stairs for a moment, just trying to get back to reality, and wrap my head around what the hell had just happened to me. After about what must have been at least 30 minutes, I decided to get up and go back inside. I tried telling my mom what had happened, but she told me to just go along with my day. Similar things have happened to her, and I probably just imagined it. I tried my best to believe her, but I knew it had to be something more. It felt so real. About 3 hours later, my dad called me and asked if I wanted to meet him at a record store. After I finished getting ready and told my mom where I was heading, I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. I got in the car and started backing out, but as I was about to get to the edge of the driveway, I got an overwhelming feeling of dread and panic again. So much so that it caused me to slam on my brakes and put it in park so I could breathe for a second. As I took a deep breath and went to rest my head on the steering wheel, I remembered what happened earlier and felt even more panicked. I looked up at my window and saw the blinds move a little and a dark sort of shadow. I don't have a better explanation. It moved quickly away from the window, and I knew what was happening. So I opened my car door and walked up to my front door, opened it, and felt that exact same feeling as I did earlier, like I'd been punched in the stomach. After calming down, the rest of the day seemed relatively normal, but I've felt paranoid ever since. I told my friend about what had happened, and they told me they've read about similar things happening on this subreddit and said I should post it here. Nothing has felt completely real ever since. Maybe I can get some answers. Edit. I'd just like to thank you all for the amount of support I've gotten from this post. I honestly assumed it would get lost among the others, so thanks to everybody. I now have a couple things to look into, such as biolocation, astral projection, doppelgangers, and even the possibility that I got caught in some kind of time loop. I wasn't one to believe in the paranormal and thought there was always some sort of logical explanation to things, but this has made me look at the world under a whole different light. Of course, with the research on these topics comes the more explainable possibilities, and I've been told by a few people that I should see a psychiatrist for what I've experienced. I've decided I'll be doing that too, along with researching all of the other possible things that may have happened. If you honestly care about what ends up happening, I'd recommend saving this post, as I'll definitely be adding more updates in the future. Thank you for reading. This happened last November, just over a year ago. Me and my friend, Joe, are pretty avid explorers. We've been in a lot of gnarly places in the backcountry. This trip we were planning was the same as any other. We were going to hike in on private land to a secluded, very large, very high railway bridge, then camp for the night and see the area for other cool stuff to explore in the future. For better understanding of what occurs, you must know the geography of the area. The bridge is located over an old river/small stream, and surrounding the stream is very high and steep mountainside and hillsides, with dense native brush and trees. The bridge, however, is located in a relatively flat area that cradles the side of one of these big hills. It's important to recognize that this stream is not large by any definition. It's relatively short, at around 3 kilometers, is located in a deep gully and has nowhere near enough water flowing to support any fish life, let alone a boat or jet boat. It's shallow, fast flowing, and has huge boulders. Couldn't even get a truck up there, and if you did somehow, you would not be driving it out. Now, we can get to the actual story. We hiked in around midday, and it was slightly overcast, but with warm northeastern winds. After walking across the maintenance line for the bridge, because crew walking along the tracks, we found a cool camp location after a while of debating on whether to set up on the south side of the stream or the north. We settled on the north. In hindsight, this was one of the best choices I've ever made in my life. After a while of shenanigans and some beer, night fell. We then made our way to bed at around 9:30 to 10:30. At this point in time, the weather had changed. A dark, cold, gloomy southerly came in, but with absolutely no wind whatsoever. After a long time of not being able to sleep, I decided I would step outside into the blanket of silence and net of darkness so I could take a quick piss. While doing so, I was enjoying my little bubble of darkness and dead silence, when, out of nowhere, the brightest light, even brighter than comprehension, burst into existence from within the riverbed before I could even finish. When I say this was bright, I truly mean that. It completely lit up the entire south face of a 600-meter tall hillside to the point that I could see the shrubs and foliage on the summit. At this point, my little fantasy of being alone was ruined in the worst way, and I stood up in shock for the 10 seconds it was illuminating the entire area. After this period had expired, I keep standing there, no longer going at this point, and I waited. After 15 seconds of complete silence, the same ordeal happened again. But this time, whatever it was, had traveled around 400 meters up the rugged and forested riverbed, only to illuminate even more for around the same amount of time. After it had turned off, I kept standing there in hopes it would illuminate again, and it sure did. But again, it had traveled at least another 300 to 400 meters further up than where it was last, in an even quicker time frame. As soon as it lit up, I darted back to the tent and grabbed my mate Joe, who I told to stand where I was and to look in the general direction. After a few seconds of suspense and denial that it would light up again, it did. Only this time it was, and I kid you not, over 2 kilometers from where I had first seen it, and this time it was completely illuminating an entire scree slope of a 1,000-meter tall ridgeline of the mountain range we were in. After this, never lit up again, and we haven't been back since. I'm extremely glad we never camped on the south side, otherwise, we would have been completely exposed and blinded by this and God knows what else. After reading this, You may think that you have an explanation of what caused it, but I'm telling you, you don't. This light source moved almost 3 kilometers in a matter of seconds. It was completely stagnant, insanely bright. There was no sound of an engine, car, boat, or anything, just complete silence. The clouds were too low and dense for it to be a plane, helicopter, or meteorite. And it sure as hell was not the front spotlight of a train due to the geography of the area. This was not a man-made energy source, and whatever it was clearly searching for something. I have 2 short stories where I believe I have blacked out, and some strange things followed after those blackouts. Also, both stories are very hazy in my mind, when I typically have a very good memory. The only other time I can remember my memory being this distorted and fuzzy is when I've experienced trauma. I almost always black out when people are yelling at me because I think my brain is trying to protect itself. I was yelled at a lot as a kid, and then, unfortunately, dated some guys who yelled at me too. One more thing to note, I get deja vu a lot. I also have had many dreams happen in real life. Both are always about really insignificant things. Experience 1. 8 years ago, I was 25. I was in my apartment with my friend Allison and my boyfriend David at the time. I was having a drink before leaving to go out to eat. We only had 1 drink and left to go eat. We probably had 2 more drinks each at dinner, but we also ate a lot. Definitely not enough to make me black out, and I wasn't on medication at the time. I don't check my phone much when I'm with other people, but I decided to take a peek and noticed a text from a mutual friend of ours. It was a long text, and I read the whole thing out loud to her. It was my first time reading it. After I finished, Allison said, "Yeah, you already read that to me back at the apartment." I have 0 memory of reading it to myself or anyone else. I don't have memory if the text appeared on my screen as a new notification, though. I didn't question her further, because I think I was embarrassed if that was true. Just a little thing, but so weird. The second, when I was 19, I was studying abroad in Italy. I had a trip the next day, so I went to the ATM to get some cash for the trip, and then to the laundromat. I'd put my laundry in, and I was sitting with my legs across a bench, and my purse wedged between my legs and the wall. We were taught to do stuff like this so no one could steal it. 2 men then came in speaking Italian to each other, and by the way, I'm a blonde white female who definitely stood out as American. One of them walks past me and blows smoke in my face, which was really odd. I don't remember what the smoke smelled like, but it wasn't cigarette smoke or something I was familiar with. I feel like I may have blacked out. Everything seemed to be very hazy, and the sun was suddenly shining very brightly in my eyes. All I could see was the silhouette of the guy as he walked past me. Then, the other guy started asking me how to use the coin machine. I was naive and didn't realize that someone who is clearly from Italy doesn't need help from a young American girl in figuring out the coin machine, because all the directions are in Italian. Duh. I stood up and I started explaining to him how to use it, leaving my purse behind on accident. I went back to sit down, and my purse was still there, and eventually the guys left. Once my laundry was done, I tried to find my wallet and pay for the dryer and realized my wallet was missing. The guys had clearly stolen my wallet and had probably been following me since I got cash at the ATM. They spent a ton of money on my credit cards, and it sucked, especially because my passport was in my wallet, which meant I couldn't go on my trip the next day and would lose the airfare. I also had to carry my wet clothes a few blocks to my apartment, since I couldn't afford to use the dryer. I was a sad sight. Fast forward to maybe 7 years later, and I was telling someone this story. When I got to the part about the guy blowing smoke in my face, before I could say it, the person said, "And then he blew smoke in your face." And I said, yes, that's exactly what happened. How did you know that? And they kind of shrugged, gave a side smirk, and laughed. I don't remember who the person was who said that to me. They either guessed or have heard of that happening before. Possibly a friend told this person the story already, which I highly doubt. Or they're a mountain biking vampire witch from the future. Has anyone else had similar stuff happen to them? I've been watching a lot of glitch stories on YouTube recently, so I thought I would come here to share mine. I used to go around pubs hosting karaoke events, and there was this one in Hayes that I did once a month. After being there a few times, I got to know some of the regulars. In particular, this nice elderly man named Steve and his usual crowd. He told me he used to work in the military in the area that I live. I told him that my grandfather, who was around the same age as him, was a military man, and I asked him if he knew him. After calling my granddad to confirm, it turns out they did know each other. My grandfather was Steve's sergeant when they were in the army. We talked further over the following weeks, and he shared many stories in his army life. He mentioned he knew my father and uncles, as my granddad told him about them during their time together, and oddly mentioned that he remembered one of my grandfather's grandchildren named Ben. He said he had been a chef for about 6 years, and he had just started to work at a pub in Woodside, Ascot. I told him that was a weird coincidence, as my name was Ben, and I was training to be a chef. We both shrugged it off, basically as him forgetting the correct name, as it was years prior that they had spoken about it. Later that year, I stopped hosting karaoke and focused on my catering job, as I had finished college and gotten a job at a small pub just near Bracknell. I was there for a couple of years before the place shut down, and spent the course of the next couple of years or so working between a few different chef jobs, until I got a job at a pub in Fifield. The owner had owned pubs before, but had only recently gotten one in this area and were looking to expand. I got on well with them, told them, and ended up becoming their head chef. After just under a year of working with them, they told me they had gotten another site, and as their head chef, asked if I would be willing to get the kitchen set up for them and kickstart it as they got staff. I agreed, and we went to see the site. It was a nice little pub called the Rose and Crown in Woodside, Ascot. It was only when we got another chef in that they started asking me about myself that I clocked it. I had been a chef for 6 years at that point, and was now working in a pub in Woodside, Ascot, just like Steve had said. This happened earlier last week at my sister's house. She lives about 5 minutes from me and has a 1-year-old baby girl who, when she goes to sleep, has a baby monitor in her room to make sure everything is okay. Anyway, my sister had just finished putting my niece to sleep, and I was watching her on the baby monitor. Nothing crazy, and it was during the middle of the week around 7:30 p.m. Well, my sister comes down and we make some small talk while I'm on my phone. Then, I randomly decide to check the baby monitor, where there is a clear view of a rocking chair in place about 3 feet away from the crib. I saw myself sitting there, wearing a t-shirt and shorts, looking down at my phone in the rocking chair. I was freaking horrified, and I screamed to my sister about it, and it scared the hell out of her. I'd never seen anything like it in my life, and I didn't know how to react. When I looked up, and she came rushing over to check the monitor, I was gone. Nothing. Just my niece sleeping in her crib in the dark. Rocking chair totally empty. Obviously, we had to go check on her niece, and I was terrified. And my sister had a bat, but there was no one there but her. Nothing was out of place. I wasn't wearing what I had on that night, though. I was clearly wearing a white t-shirt and gym shorts with Nikes on. I had my glasses on, and you could see bright cell phone screens in the dark as I hunched over to look at it. I never looked at the camera, but I could tell it was me. And I've not been able to sleep much since then. I can't get that picture out of my head, and the baby monitor doesn't record video, or else I would have gone back and looked. It was probably the craziest thing to ever happen to me in my life. I wasn't high or drunk or anything like that. It was just a normal weekday after work. Edit. To clarify a question that has been asked a lot, no. I've never sat in that rocking chair before, and definitely not wearing what I saw in the video. The only time I've been in that room is during the day, but I never have sat in that rocking chair before while on my phone. I posted this as a reply a while ago, but I thought it deserved its own thread. We were driving from Santa Barbara to LA in a hired car at night. We had to drive through some mountains. We pulled over into a pitch-black car park while my wife sorted some blankets out for our toddler. He was asleep in the back. Now this sounds really cheesy, but it's true, so hey, I'll just type it out. I felt really uneasy in that car park. There was no one around apart from the busy mountain road. I sat there looking up through the glass ceiling, nervous, and couldn't wait to leave when I saw a shooting star. Not just any star, but really huge, like it was from a movie. I was about to mention it to my wife when I noticed another car parked up in the corner to my left. It was deep in the forest shadows and just sitting there. I wasn't sure if it had just pulled in or if I hadn't noticed it before, but either way, I was silently itching to leave. With a small baby in the back in an area I didn't know, I was feeling watched and really vulnerable. I quietly hurried my wife up. Strangely, almost unable to speak, I started the engine and turned the car around slowly. Mainly just so we were moving more than anything. The parked car was now on my right, and, at least now, I was facing the exit to the main road. It was then that I saw some movement in the car, and I went cold. It looked like a silhouette of a man walking toward us. Fast. I froze, and then saw to my left another man on the other side, just as fast but much closer. I totally panicked. I slammed my foot down without saying anything, and screeched out of the car park. My wife screamed. The main road was busy, with cars in both directions, and feeling the heat behind me, I quickly pulled out to turn left into the traffic. It was then a huge truck came over the ridge, fast. Blinded by the headlights, we embraced for impact from the side. Honestly, key parts of my life flashed through my head, and time slowed down enough for me to realize that I'd killed my family. Cut to a second later, and there are no cars on the road at all. It's dark, silent, and pitch black. We're slowly driving along the main road at 20 miles per hour. All is quiet. We looked at each other and didn't say much for a while until I just said, I think we used up a life there. We've hardly spoken of it since. A very weird thing now is that I brought it up a while ago, and my wife could hardly remember it. This happened about 6 or 7 years ago, when I was still in college. Some quick info about me and the class to help with the non-logic of the situation. It was mid-semester, so I knew the building and classroom by heart at this point. Honestly, no chance of a brain fart moment by choosing the wrong building. I'm pretty active and friendly in class, so even if I don't know every person's name, I know what they look like and have probably had at least one conversation with them. I usually got to class early and had to wait for the previous class to let out before I could go into the room, meaning I was familiar with the students and instructor of the class before ours. It was rare, but sometimes the class would meet in a different location, like the library. I had 2 of my best friends in the same class as me, and we would hang out in the courtyard after class. So, I happened to be running late this particular morning. No biggie. I had great attendance and figured the instructor wouldn't mind me being 5 minutes late. I get to the building and down the hall to my classroom. It's quiet, but that's not too strange since classes have started. I opened the door to my class, and everyone in the room, every single person, stops and turns to look at me, which is common practice when someone interrupts the class. But I didn't recognize a single damn person in the room. Not a single face was familiar. I close the door, double-check the room number, 134, and it's correct. I walk outside, double-check the building, B, and it's also correct. Okay, I think. Class is just meeting somewhere else, and I missed the memo. Again, no big deal. I'll get notes from my besties. I wait in the courtyard and my friends show up at 11:40. Our class ends at 11:30. I ask them where the class was, and they say, "What are you talking about?" I explain what happened and they just stare at me like I've got 2 heads. Then one says, "Dude, class was in the same room at the same time. You sure you're not just confused?" Well, this time I am really freaking confused, because I know it was the right time, building, and room, but apparently my class just wasn't there. I even asked the instructor during the next class and he confirmed what my friend said. It still bothers me to this day, and I really can't explain it. Just to make an edit, since a couple folks have asked, I'll add that I asked the instructor during the next class if the previous class had been in a different room or time slot, and he said no. He also confirmed that no one arrived late or opened the door after class started. So, I was just reading an old thread from here about phone calls from deceased friends and relatives. I have a story that relates, but that is for another time. This is something that recently happened to me, and I feel weird mentioning it to anyone, because they think it is just a coincidence and I'm trying to make something out of nothing, but I can't let it go. Long story short, my mom had been sick for the past 2 years. Things got worse to last year, and then really bad this spring. In July, she passed away. I have sisters, but I was the main person taking care of her, and we became exceptionally close in the past 2 years. I was the one that she called for everything. Needing help ordering something online, questions about insurance, doctor's appointments, random other things pertaining to day-to-day life, etc. At the end, she was so weak, so when anyone asked her to verify the last 4 of her social or date of birth or secondary insurance to Medicare, she knew that I would answer for her, and I helped her with all of it, so I was well versed in her personal information. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, a friend and I were going to a drive-in movie, and I needed a few things at Target. So, I decided to place an order for pickup and added a few snacks for the movie so we would all be set. I get to Target and check in on the app. As usual, the app says that someone will be right out with my order and to show them the 4-digit code through the window. I briefly glance down at the numbers, look away, and then quickly look back at the numbers in utter shock. The last 4 digits are the last 4 digits of my mother's social security number. It wasn't backwards or off by a number or out of order, but in perfect order, exactly as listed on her social security card. I feel like this could be her, but I'm not sure what proof would be sufficient, since I think even if I were to see her, I would think I was going crazy or just needed sleep. I noticed numbers a lot on license plates, receipts, clocks, etc., but can't recall ever seeing something that hit me like this. Is this a glitch? Or a thinning veil scenario? Or even just a strange coincidence? Anyways, thank you for reading, and I appreciate your thoughts. A month ago, I was sitting on the edge of my bed while looking at my phone. My son came into the room with our short-haired cat, cradled in his arms. I put my phone beside me flat on the bed. My son put the cat in my arms and walked away to go sort his Legos. While I'm still cradling the kitty, I shift him to one side to pick my phone back up. The cat always gets annoyed when I look at my phone while holding him. He swatted at the screen for a few seconds until I got annoyed and put the phone next to me again. I cuddle the kitty while still sitting at the edge of my bed. After about 30 seconds, he decides he wants down and wiggles out of my hold. He crosses my lap and sits next to my phone. Now that both of my arms were free, I turned and picked up my phone. I held it with both hands and rested my elbows on my thighs, making me hunch over a bit, but I'm relaxed. The kitty sees me on my phone and climbs on my lap and leans against me. Instinctually, I wrap my arm around him while still holding my phone in my right hand. Then, I feel something small in the center of my palm while still holding my phone in that hand. I feel the small thing roll out of my palm in between my 2 fingers. As it falls, it hits the top of my foot and I hear whatever it is softly drop onto the carpet. My bed is raised high, and I'm so short that my feet dangle 2 feet from the floor while sitting on the edge of my bed. I was really puzzled in that moment by that feeling. Still holding the phone flat in my palm, I lean forward and look down to see what it was. I see a red Lego brick. I called my son back in the room, I'm still holding my needy cat, and tell him the freaky thing that just happened. He looked down and saw the brick and was wondering how it ended up there. He'd not opened his Legos until after he brought the cat to me, because the cat likes to jump into the Legos. There's no way the cat transferred the brick into my palm without me noticing. And there's no way that the brick had been stuck to my phone at all either, as I had laid my phone down flat on the bed. I distinctly felt the brick pop into my palm under my phone and then roll between my fingers. It hit my foot, and when I heard it land, I looked down. This all happened in a second. I joked that my parallel universe son must be looking for his Lego now. This is a story that haunts me daily. This happened in 1992. I had just graduated high school and was working in a warehouse. I kind of enjoyed it, and settled thinking I would probably retire here. Yep, I had zero ambitions. I was a sad, lazy, cringe-inducing bag. A new guy started. It's a warehouse with high turnover, so nothing unusual about new guys. And everyone asked if we were related because we looked alike. He was probably late 30s, early 40s, and I was 18 at the time, and he was fatter. He seemed to carry himself like me the way he walked and spoke. His second day, we worked together on a wrapping station, and the first thing he said to me was, "You still have that Penthouse magazine under your mattress?" And I did. Weird, but Totally normal for teen boys, I suppose. He then said, "I know everything about you. You are worried about never getting a girlfriend." I was floored, but I again thought it was a usual teenage thing. I mean, I wasn't the best looking guy, so I guess it wasn't a stretch to guess. Probably the start of bullying and the end of my job, as one thing I liked most about myself is that I have no problems fighting anyone, anywhere, anytime. No matter how big or how many, I was always down. I never won, but I could take a beating and the person usually quit and never messed with me again. I asked him why he was saying all this stuff, and he looked at me, and his expression is seared into my mind, and it left an image that I see daily. He said, "I am you." He then went on to tell me everything about myself. I mean, my deepest, darkest secrets that no one knows. Then, he kept telling me more about myself. And then we went to lunch and were outside smoking and, yep, same brand, Camel Wide regulars. Hard to find where I lived, so I'd never seen anyone else smoking them. I asked him to be serious and asked how he knew all that stuff. And he said, "I already told you, Tom Thok." Tom Thok is a nickname that only one person ever called me, and he was my dad's friend that I barely saw. A crappy Jetta pulled into the parking lot, and he said, "That's our girl. She's the demon who is horrible to us." I asked him why he was with her, and he said, "She's the best we could do." When she got out, she was disgusting looking. I mean, absolute trailer trash would be too kind, and she waddled her ass over to us. She said, "Let's go." Before he left, he stared right into my soul and said, "We deserve better. Please, go to college and stop being lazy and make something out of yourself." Trailer Park Girl just kind of laughed like, "Yeah, right." He left with her, and I never saw him again. I think I ran into a younger version of her at a friend's house years later, and he introduced me and said we should hook up. I said no. I went to college and stopped being a pathetic, lazy cringe fest. I accomplished everything I set out to do, as I always felt the need to not let him down. Now, I know none of this makes sense. How can I explain something that I can barely understand myself? None of it makes sense whatsoever, like why would a future me get a job with me? He had to fill out a job application and have his references checked, right? Yeah. I asked my manager, who was a POS, who just told me to mind my own damn business and focus on my job and try to be less of a screw-up. Has anyone had something like this happen to them? It's haunted me daily since. I'm 48, and I haven't seen any time travel machines. Help me out here. Maybe end this once and for all. We were in the mountains of West Virginia at a nice-sized cabin by the flowing river. We sat by a campfire, slowly burning out as the night continued. Then, before we called it a night, we heard it. It was the sound of an owl. Now, at first, you may think, how is that scary? But what we heard wasn't a normal owl. It was as if a human verbally said "who" out loud in the night. My friend was on his phone texting a group chat as it happened. I looked at him and said, "Did you hear that?" He said he did. We both agreed that it sounded like a human and not a real owl. We heard it again, and then we ran inside. That's not where it ends, though. A few months after it happened, me and what I thought was another friend, we'll call him S, were talking about scary stuff that we had experienced. So I brought up the time that my friend, we'll call him C, and I heard a strange owl outside that sounded like a human. The thing he said back was questionable, to say the least. He said, "What are you talking about? That was me, not C." At first, I didn't believe him. But as we continued talking, he said more and more things that added up to what I remembered. He'd pretty much convinced me that I was wrong. Later that night, we all got on a call together and talked about it. C had said that he was there and he was the one that heard the owl. And we all were skeptical of each other until C said he specifically remembered looking towards the top of the trees and sitting in the double chairs that we had. S said that he did the exact same thing. Then, he turned around and remembered looking toward the top of the trees. I know that it's a general thing to do, and not hard evidence, but another thing may convince you that they have the same memory. C left for a minute, and when he came back, me and S asked him if he remembered a branch breaking, and he said, "No, I don't." We were testing him. There was no branch that broke, and he passed that test. So we had to figure he was telling the truth. I've asked both of them separately if they're joking, and they both said they're telling me the truth, so I don't know if we experienced something paranormal or something with aliens. We do have cameras though, so we'll be checking who was there at the time. I'll try to post an update when I have an answer. So, I'm just browsing this subreddit in my bed today, which reminded me of some experience I've had myself. I'll go with this one. Like, 10 years ago, I was 18 and experiencing my first summer jobs. I would work some weeks here and there at random places just to get some cash. For a month, I was working in retail, and I occasionally had to work in the warehouse to receive and prepare orders, refill the store, etc. The place was big, and there were a ton of things, so they had a forklift. The boss would tell me that if I'm good at the job, he would keep me after the few weeks that I was supposed to work here, and then he would pay for me to get the forklift license so I could use it and do more tasks. Because, at that point, only one other guy was the warehouse manager, and he could use it. And without the ability to drive it, I was slow, and sometimes even useless to assist him. The other thing is that the boss never came to the warehouse, and the other guy, which was super nice to me, found it very pointless to have me there, and he could barely find me any tasks to do. And he was right. I was more a loss of time to him than actual extra hands. So, then, one day, he was like, "Screw it, you can drive it. Screw the license, I can teach you in a few minutes." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, it doesn't look complicated at all." And I was motivated to do more than what I was doing so that I could get a long-time contract after the summer weeks. When I proceeded to sit inside the forklift, turn the key on and press the pedal, it wouldn't do anything. So the guy took my place, and it worked. He was like, "See, it's pretty simple." When I hopped back on, the forklift would not work again. Confused, the guy who was then standing next to the forklift would even press the pedal with his hand while I was sitting in it, and it would work. Each time I would put my foot back on the pedal, nothing would happen. We were both confused, and we abandoned the idea of letting me drive it. Somehow, the forklift would not react to me only, like if some angel was preventing me to do it. Who knows what would have happened if I learned to drive it on my own in the back of the warehouse. Didn't keep the job either anyway. Not paranormal or crazy, but it's weird, and I still remember it to this day. Okay, hi everyone. For starters, this is my first post. Here's what happened last night that I still can't explain. So, I was learning how to skateboard with my two friends. My friend and I were about to skate down my street on our boards, which is slightly downhill, when a homeless man walked up to us. We chatted briefly, and he asked if we had any money. I said I didn't have cash, but that my roommate made a bunch of homeless bags, and that I could run in my house and grab one for him really quick. At this point, I had one foot on the board and one foot on the ground. There was a snowbank right next to me, so I know that I would have wedged the skateboard into the snowbank so it wouldn't have rolled down the hill. I was right next to it, so it was the obvious choice. I was right across from my house, so I ran in and grabbed the bags, which were right next to the front door. This whole thing took about 20 seconds. I come out, give the homeless man the bags, and immediately look down and say, "Where's my board?" My friends look confused and said that they don't know, but they just saw me on it. The homeless man also said that he didn't see it. We thought, well, maybe he took it, but it was a whole-ass skateboard, and he used both hands to open the bags and look through them. Plus, he was standing in front of my friends the whole time. And it was 1 a.m. and completely dead outside. The only other thing that happened was a car passed while I was inside, so they thought that maybe someone grabbed it real quick from the car and stole it, which was highly unlikely. We looked around for 20 minutes. We looked down the street in case it rolled and no one noticed, and we were stumped. I asked a million times if they were messing with me, and they sincerely promised that they weren't, and were just as confused as me. It was also my friend's board, so he was concerned because it was expensive. I told them that it was probably a glitch in the Matrix, and that I wouldn't be surprised if it showed up today. Sure enough, my friend leaves this morning, calls me and says, "Well, I've closed the loop in the Matrix. I was walking to my car this morning up the road, and the skateboard was right next to the dumpster." The dumpster was a bit up the road, which is uphill, and we weren't anywhere near there during our conversation. I still have absolutely no idea how it got there, and without anybody noticing within a 20-second span of time. In the beginning of 2019, I went to a boarding school in Denmark, taking a 10th grade before going to what can only be compared to high school, but in Denmark. The boarding school and all 105 students were in the middle of preparing for a big theater concert that would premiere just a few days later. Live music, acting, story, all the things we would focus on in our specific lines, meaning that me and a friend had to help with sound, video, and so on. This friend's name is Mikkel, and he's important to what happened. So, a few months earlier, school had made a poetry slam competition, and I had written a poetry slam about who I am and what I hope people see me like. And the theater teacher had quietly asked me if I would be interested in adding a secret part to the theater concert, being my poetry slam. I accepted. For a long time, it was just called The Secret Scene, and most people didn't know until theater started practicing, because me, being in media, was suddenly a part of their work. On the night of the big reveal and first playthrough, I had asked Mikkel to go with me. I'm shy and anxious, and I didn't want to hang out there alone. I didn't know the theater people that well, and so we went to the Diamond, like we call it, to play through, and then went to get cake in the dining hall afterwards. So, I'm sitting there eating a piece of cake and getting a cup of tea, and Mikkel joins me at the table. Sitting on the edge of the table, he's looking down at me a little, and we're talking about a video we were working on for the big theater concert. It's in the corner, by the way. We're, kind of alone, everyone else being busy with their things. So, Mikkel says, "Alright, and so what we have to do..." He blinks, losing the thread of what he was saying, but it's late, both me and him are tired. I don't think much about it, and so he repeats himself. And I'm listening closely, paying attention to what he's saying so that I can try and picture it in my head, and so on. What we have to do with the video is cut off. Like, with the blink of my eyes, he's looking in a completely different direction, talking to a person who wasn't there just seconds ago, before just walking away, not even looking over his shoulder. I told him about it afterwards, and he was like, "That can't be. You weren't even there. I mean, Terza said you went straight to your room after practice. I was looking for you and you just disappeared." Or something like that. You get the idea. Afterwards, he claimed there to be big differences in my poetry slam, but that it had gotten a lot better with the changes. And everyone else thought so I never challenged it. When I hung out with him a few months ago during summer break, we happened to talk about it again. And he is now completely sure that I never changed my poetry slam either. But that the night after practice I had zoned out while he talked, and had seemed really ill and scared until after the premiere night, where I became myself again, supposedly, and that he, during those days, often would find me forgetting major parts of my poetry slam. I don't even know. Hello everyone. This is kind of hard to describe in text, but I will try to paint a picture of what my glitch experience was. If you need a visual, go to Google Earth, look up Bitney Springs in Nevada City, California, view Rough and Ready that connects to Bitney Springs Road. A little further up, beyond a bridge, there is Newton Road that brings you up the mountain to Highway 49. Usually taking this route to 49, you would go down R&R Highway, turn right into Bitney Springs, pass the spring, go a few miles, turn right onto Newton Road, which brings you all the way up to the 49. It's very simple. No circular road that brings you around to Rough and Ready. So I was in my car, driving down Rough and Ready Highway. I come to the stop sign to turn right onto Bitney Springs Road. I turn right, past the spring, go about a mile into the woods, and come to a construction zone. It was the type with a flagger to move you on once incoming traffic passes. So I'm sitting at this construction site. The man holding the stop sign is hiding behind his stop sign. I find this odd. A few cars go by, everything is normal, and then he flips his sign to signal me to go ahead, so I drive through the site. I'm driving what seems like several minutes, and suddenly, I'm back at the stop sign from Bitney Springs Road, facing the T of Rough and Ready Highway. I'm totally confused because this is not the direction that I was driving. In fact, it was the complete opposite direction. So I turn left onto R&R, and see if it really is that road. And it is. So I turn back around and head back to Bitney. I turn right onto Bitney, past the spring, and come back up to the construction site, and it's all flipped backwards. The man who was originally in the front is now at the rear end of the construction site. I pass through and head back the normal way up to the 49, completely confused as to what just happened. And this is the weirdest and most confusing experience of my life so far. This happened about a year ago, but it dawned on me that someone looking for glitches might be interested in this experience. Certainly, if anyone else has witnessed something like this, I would love to know. So, what happened is very simple. I was doing laundry at my college, and naturally went to the laundry room. On this particular day, a machine error had flooded the room, leaving a puddle of maybe half an inch to an inch or so of water, depending on where one stepped. I noticed that in this puddle, there was a drip, just as if a faucet was leaking above it. Rings emanated from one area of the water and no other. I was the only one in the room. I thought it was odd because I saw no water source for the drip. I looked closer, as close as I could, and the effect continued in that one singular spot of the room. What really freaked me out was when I put my hand directly above it. The drip persisted, and little rings of water kept emanating semi-rhythmically from the spot. I looked at the ceiling, absolutely nothing. No draft. There was only tile floor under the water in every direction. I still, for the life of me, cannot figure this one out. I know that somewhere on my phone I took footage of the drip, which I cannot for the life of me find. I'm sure that sounds a bit fake, but I think it may be saved somewhere weird, like a Snapchat memory or something. Maybe it was deleted by accident. I'm always running out of space, which would be a bummer. But I was stone cold sober, just doing my laundry. I'm quite confident that what I have described here is what I saw. As an edit, after writing this little reflection after so much time, I tried hard to look for the video, but I could not find it. But I do know that I examined the video several times, and it absolutely showed circles emanating from water, and showed clearly that my hand above it did nothing to stop it, despite being totally unaffected by anything at all. So, as far as I'm concerned, the phenomena itself was proven. But I realized that this is not satisfying to one who was not there. It was truly unbelievable, I will say that. I spent a long time sitting with it, and honestly, I feel deeply lucky to have witnessed something so utterly unexplainable. Also, it's worth noting that the pattern of water faucet drip is one phenomena of nature which actually resembles randomness. I believe it has something to do with the Mandelbrot set. I know that the disturbances to the water occurred just in this kind of irregular but regular way. It was unmistakably a fluid intervention that would have been the cause of it if it was natural. There were absolutely no other forces, and most incredibly, no other disturbances anywhere on the water. Just stillness. This little event has been something that I have never shared, but it has opened my eyes to the possibility of reality outside of what can be predicted or understood. It was certainly as beautiful as it was spooky. Okay, I know this will sound like a technical glitch, but I believe it to be more than that, because I feel like the glitch is more in the behavior than the computer itself. So a couple of years ago, I was in college, and it was a Sunday evening. I was doing a homework for a mental health class. Basically, we had to watch a 10-part documentary on YouTube about depression, and write a summary for each part. I think it's because the teacher had to be away for the week, so she made us do that since she couldn't teach us about it in person. Anyway, I vividly remember doing the whole thing. I remember the videos, what they talked about, the people in it. I remember huge chunks of text on that Word document that I wrote. It took me like 2 to 3 hours, and I was finally done. I was satisfied with my work, so I saved it in my folder where I usually save all of my schoolwork. After that, I vividly remember sending it to my teacher via email. I remember it being correctly sent, just like any other email I usually send, and since I was sending homework, I especially made sure it was being sent correctly, and that the Wi-Fi was working, etc. Then, I went to the bathroom and then to the kitchen to get a snack. When I came back to the computer in my room, I went on Tumblr or whatever other non-school related website, and I felt glad and relieved that I didn't have to stress about it anymore. I texted my friend who took the same class as me and said if she had done it and if it went well, etc. She said that she was almost done and she was on the 12th video. I was confused because I thought it was only a 10-part documentary, but I checked, and indeed it was a 13-part documentary. I think I missed the last 3 ones because they were not included in the playlist that I watched. I was a bit bummed out, but it was only 3 parts, so it wasn't that bad. I could just do them right now, add it to my homework, and resend it to my teacher, simply telling her that I had forgotten the last 3 parts on the prior document. So, I went into my schoolwork folder and searched for the document. It was nowhere to be found. At first I was confused, but I thought maybe I had saved it to another folder by accident. I searched in literally every folder in my computer, but it wasn't there. I also used the search engine to try and find it on my computer by searching for the name of the doc. I precisely remember calling it Depression_Documentary. I even checked every other document with different names, thinking maybe I had saved it with another name and my memory was faulty. This took a while. Again, nowhere to be found. I thought maybe I had deleted it by accident. I even checked the trash folder, but it wasn't there. I went to check my emails because I remembered sending it to my teacher, so I thought I would just re-download it from there. So I went to check on my sent messages folder, and guess what? The email I sent to my teacher with the homework wasn't there. I did not understand because I precisely remembered sending it to her, and the message being sent normally only a couple of minutes ago. I checked every folder, it wasn't there. I even checked my inbox on another computer, on my phone, but still, it was not there. I checked back on my computer again. I even checked on all my USB keys because I thought maybe I had saved my work on it and then removed it maybe accidentally, but no, it was still nowhere to be found. At this point, I was starting to get really upset. How could my homework have disappeared from my computer in the 5 minutes I took to go pee and have a snack? And not only that, but the email that I sent to my teacher was nowhere to be found. When I couldn't find it on my computer, I blamed it on a technological bug, but when I saw that the email was also non-existent, I was starting to think it was something deeper. Did I just imagine the past 2 to 3 hours writing my homework? Did I dream it? Did I fall asleep and sleepwalk to my computer to write my homework? I highly doubted it, since I've never sleepwalked in my life. I remember being so pissed off because I could not understand why the email was not there and why the document was not on the computer. I could not find any logical explanation. I was starting to question reality at this point. I was also pissed because I just spent several hours doing that stupid homework and all my hard work and efforts were just gone. I still had hope that my teacher received the email, though. I thought maybe it just didn't show up on my sent messages because of a bug. The next morning, I did the last 3 parts of the documentary on another separate document and sent it to my teacher via email. I asked at the same time if she had received my last document that I had sent her with the first 10 parts of the homework. When she had answered, later that day, she said she received the one email I just sent her with the attached Word doc with parts 11 to 13, but she hadn't received any other email from me with the first other 10 parts. I kindly asked if she could check again because I vividly remember sending it to her. She later answered that she had checked every possible folder from her inbox, even on her own computer, but she could not find it. I had never been more confused in my life. I remember doing that homework. I remember saving it, sending it to my teacher, and yet all of the evidence was gone. To this day, I still have no clue what happened. I still never retrieved the damn document. The only explanation I could find is it was either one of those glitch in the Matrix type things, or maybe I shifted to another universe when I went to get a snack. Honestly, It sounds absolutely ridiculous, but I don't know how to explain it otherwise. By the way, I didn't do the other 10 parts again. I just refused to believe the file had disappeared. I don't know. Anyway, I should have redone it, because I had an impressive 0% grade for that assignment. I lost 10 to 15% off my final grade because of that stupid glitch. God, I was so pissed. I still had a super good final grade in the class, above average, but I'm still forever upset of that 10 to 15% more I could have had if this stupid event didn't happen. Guys, help me out here. Something happened yesterday and it's really bothering me, because there doesn't seem to be any rational explanation for it. Yesterday, I arrived home with my arms full of stuff from my car. I make my way to the kitchen area, dump everything on the kitchen table, turn the light on, glance in. Everything is normal, and I turn around to start grabbing stuff to put away. When I turn back around, my dog is going at a large brick of butter right near the fridge, and this is where it gets weird. For one thing, when I looked in the kitchen, there was nothing amiss. I also don't know if the dog is part of this glitch, or just the butter and then she saw it, and ran in to take advantage of this situation. For another, there was no wrapper on or near the butter, which, if it had fallen from the fridge, that's not how I would have stored it. Another, when I went to put the butter in the trash, and when I picked it up, it was soft. Not hard like it should have been if it had just fallen from the fridge. Until this point, I had fully convinced myself that, despite not being hungry or thirsty and not having a need to open the fridge, I had opened it anyways, and just not noticed that the butter had fallen out. Or maybe before I left, I'd done it, and that's why it was soft. But even at this, I was slightly incredulous, but it was still a somewhat acceptable explanation. Until I really did open the fridge, to find that there was no butter missing. The butter I thought that was on the floor was in the door, in its wrapper, right where it was supposed to be. I had used the other half last week to make chocolate chip cookies, and there were another 2 sticks in a box in the drawer too. No missing butter. So this is where I start kind of wigging out. Where the hell did this butter come from? I'm kind of mad actually that I can't figure it out. I feel like this is happening to me more frequently. There was another instance a few months back in which a guy fully disappeared, and that doesn't make sense either. But this is straining the limits of what I find myself able to explain away. I'm either leveling up or losing my damn mind. I don't know what I'm looking for here, but if you could either find an explanation I can swallow, or tell me something similar happened to you, or even some alternate reality explanation. I mean, anything at this point would help, because I feel like I am losing it. I'm not the greatest storyteller, so my apologies if this makes no sense. A couple of years ago, I met this girl online who I will refer to as Marla. I met her online through an app called Whisper. One day, I came across a Whisper posted by her. It was about how it's a red flag if a guy is in his 30s and still living in his mom's basement. The app has a chat feature, so I sent her a message. She messaged me back an hour or two later, "You're not a beautiful, unique snowflake." Her response had nothing to do with what I initially messaged her, so I was confused. I responded with, "Huh?" She then proceeded to remind me that my username was Tyler Durden, and that her message was a reference to a quote from a movie. It had completely flown over my head, to be honest. I don't recall why, but I took a screenshot of our initial conversation. Conversations on the app would usually fizzle out after a couple of hours. It didn't happen with her, though. After a couple of days of talking through the app, we exchanged pictures and phone numbers. We got along well. We would text all day and the convos never went stale. After a couple of weeks of texting, I finally worked up the courage to ask her out. We made plans to meet up for dinner. She was even prettier in person. We hung out for a couple of hours, and I thought it went pretty well. There was no awkward silences. We laughed at each other's jokes. She even opened up to me about some stuff that was going on in her life. After dinner, we drove around for a bit and she passed by her childhood home. At the end of the date, she asked me if I was free to go with her to IKEA the following Sunday. I've been on bad dates, but this was not one of them. But this is not a story about how guy meets girl and they both live happily ever after. About a week after our date, she simply stopped replying to my texts. I was genuinely surprised that she was ghosting me. I was sad, sure, but more than anything, I recall being shocked. I blew up her phone with texts and calls, seeking an explanation. Unfortunately, I never got one. After a couple of days, I gave up and decided to move on. I deleted her phone number, I deleted all the pictures that she had sent me, and I deleted the screenshot of our first convo that I took. Let's fast forward to 2019. Around this time last year, I was talking to this girl. One day, she texts me and tells me that she wasn't feeling it anymore, and that we should go our separate ways. I appreciated her honesty and wished her well. It sucked, but I wasn't too hurt over it. I got to thinking, though. I reflected back on the girls I had met and dated over the past several years, and I got to thinking about Marla. Yeah, she ghosted me, but from a personality perspective, I haven't met anyone quite like her. What happened next is something I can't explain. I was in my room, thinking about her and how I was done with the casual dating scene. Mind you, I was completely sober during this endeavor. I then get an email. Nothing crazy, right? We get those all the time. But it was an email for myself. There was no subject line or text in the body. There was an attachment, though. It was a screenshot that I took of our first conversation. I had deleted that screenshot years ago after Marla had ghosted me. What's more, I took the screenshot on a phone that I stopped using a long time ago. I never told anyone I took that screenshot, not even Marla. Emails don't just appear out of nowhere. Yeah, technology can be glitchy, but not like this. I have no explanation as to how I received that email, and if anyone has any theories, I am all ears. This happened in the past week at my work. At the end of the day, I leave and I'm parked just behind the building. I work in a city, and there is another building that sits up against ours, so I'm essentially parked in the alley. So, I leave work and get into my car. It's dark outside, and I'm fiddling around with the heat, lights, getting my podcast set up, etc. Out of the corner of my eye, I can see someone standing in the darkness just across the alleyway. Not unusual. Other people park here sometimes, and they definitely use the alleyway to smoke. The person is just standing there, and I don't think much of it. I'm just doing my thing, getting ready for the drive home. Anyways, as I'm plugging my phone in, I see from my peripheral vision that they start walking towards my car. This all basically happened in an instant, but I can only describe it as I go to turn my head and look at them, and at the same time, I hear the sound of a knuckle knocking on my window trying to get my attention. But as soon as my eyes fixed on the person at the window, it was like they vanished into thin air. Completely gone. Alleyway empty. And it was just like they popped out of existence. And honestly, I would have believed it was just my eyes playing tricks on me the whole time, except for the fact that I heard them knock on the window. It was a very distinct sound of one knuckle knocking against glass. Needless to say, this freaked me out a bit, so I gave up on fiddling with the stuff in my car, put my seatbelt on, and drove away pretty quickly. But that's not where the story ends. The next day, I'm leaving work again in much the same way. Once again, it's dark out, and once again, I'm sitting in my car, plugging in my phone, picking the podcast episode. The incident from the night before, totally out of my mind. This time, my head is down looking at my phone, and I see nothing out of my peripheral vision. However, I'm snapped back to reality by the exact same sound of a knuckle rapping against my window. Naturally, I jerk my head up instantly and look at my window, terrified that there will be no one there. But this time, there is a woman standing at my window who works at the event center right next to my building. In disbelief, I roll down my window and she asks me something about parking further down the alley so they can get a truck in, as they've had some trouble getting deliveries. I managed to sputter out that, of course, I would move my car wherever they needed, and then I desperately asked her if she had knocked on my car window or tried to get my attention the night before. She looked at me funny and said that she hadn't, and that they were closed yesterday with no events. Once again, I snapped my seatbelt on and drove away pretty quick. This freaked me out. It's like the day before I had previewed what would happen the next night. It was exactly the same knocking sound, and this still confuses me so much. I'm a skeptic naturally, so I don't know whether to believe this or not. I reluctantly spoke to my best friend about it, and she said it was weird as well. I've been thinking about these events for about 2-ish weeks, and basically, recently just before school started, early September, I was thinking about the topic of shifting realities, because I'm just really unhappy with my life in general, and I feel like all my choices in general have been pretty stupid and poor, so I was simply surface thinking, and didn't really attempt any methods or whatever. And when I started school, my target grade, which isn't supposed to change at all from the last year, went up a single grade, which shocked me. Of course, I looked into it, and observed other students' target grades in that specific class, and some students' target grades had changed from what I remember them being. Some stayed the same. I thought to myself, maybe I was doing well and the teacher decided to change it? But I haven't been doing well in that class in general, and there's this girl who I'm friends with, who is absolutely amazing in my class, that still has the exact same target grade as before. It didn't go up or anything. I double-checked with my teacher too. I asked her if target grades had changed, and she said no. They haven't changed since last year. This I find very weird, but obviously wasn't enough to convince me, so I just continued on with my day, and I then realized that in the same class, someone's entire identity had changed. A boy and then another boy that I'm both acquainted with switched identities. I'm familiar with both of the boys, and they literally switched names and classes. This specific boy was never in my class before, which freaked me out. The other boy also appears to be missing, or at least I haven't seen him from ever since school started. I also noticed some other weird stuff, like a cat's missing poster money reward going from 300 pounds down to 100 pounds, then back up to 300 pounds. This happened whenever I would pass it in the streets, but maybe I'm just being delusional, I'm not sure. There was also one more thing. I've always suffered from insomnia, and always would go to sleep at such late times, like around 2 to 3 in the morning, maybe even later than that. And then randomly, there was a period of time where I would naturally fall asleep at such early times, like around 7 to 8 p.m. which weirded me the heck out because I've never been able to do that. In 2009, I went to work in New Orleans with one of my closest friends. We were hired to run new data wiring for the Hotel Roosevelt on Canal Street, since Katrina had destroyed the area. A few days in, and we decided to work nights. We would be the only ones on site, aside from an old security guard who was a retired New Orleans cop. The place was creepy at night, but I'd never seen anything more than a stray cat or a loud bang off in the distance. We went to work Saturday evening. That night we had a few runs and planned to run a fiber line from the top floor to the basement to end the shift. It was now Sunday, Easter Sunday, around 3:30 a.m. The entire hotel was under renovation, so the only elevator that worked was the service elevator, which was a pain in the ass. You couldn't press the call button for the elevator and have it come to your floor. You had to be inside of it holding the down or up while someone held the door shut. Remember this for later. We lugged all of our equipment to the top floor and got everything to pull. Every floor has a telephone room and it's in the service area. This area has a paper with the floor number near the elevator because every service area is identical. They're stacked on top of one another from floor to floor, and they have pipes running through the floors to allow wiring to pass through or to the room. Now, every floor has its own theme, not some outlandish jungle or space theme, but the carpets and hallway lights differ from floor to floor. We start the pool. I can't remember how tall the building was, so let's say it was level 25. We all get in the elevator and go down to the next floor. A few floors down, maybe the 22nd floor, our boss says grab the elevator and bring it down to the 12th floor so we can ride it back up to grab our equipment, and I'll meet you there. Since it was faster to jump down the stairs than it was to operate the pain-in-the-ass elevator, my buddy and I get in the sketchy elevator and go down to the 12th floor. We get off, and I clearly remember seeing the number 12 on the piece of paper as we exited the elevator. We walk over to the telephone room, and there's the fiber that we're pulling, already ran through the floor, going down to the 11th. We look at one another, say no freaking way he's that fast. We start walking back to the service elevator to go down to the basement, since we work with the Flash, and the elevator is not there. Instant panic, shock, confusion comes over me. I look up on the wall, and it says 22. Wait, what? How? How is this possible? My buddy and I are in a panic. We both hit the stairs and run down 10 flights in seconds. We hit the stairway door open, and there it is. The elevator on the 12th floor. Doors open. Its crappy little dim orange light shining in all its hellish glory. We look at one another, just completely scared and yelling for our boss. As we run down the stairs towards the first floor, I've never run so fast in my entire life. That was the last night I worked in that hotel. We left New Orleans a day later. I don't know what happened, and I've tried telling other people this story and, well, they laugh it off. I even call my buddy from time to time out of the blue and have him give me the same story. There's a wormhole in the Hotel Roosevelt, NOLA, and I'll always wonder if I'm in the right dimension. As an edit, I sent this to the guy I was working with that night, and he said this. No, that's pretty much exactly as I remember it. The only thing different I would say is that I remember each floor being a different theme, like different paint, different carpet. Like when we first got off the elevator from going down to 12. When we got off on 12, we saw on the wall, it's at 12, which you had mentioned when we went to the IT room. And that's when we noticed the wire had already been pulled. When we walked out of the IT room, that's when I thought that I noticed the carpet and everything else was different. And then we ran back to realize that the elevator was not there, and we were actually on the 22nd floor. Today, I was selling some clothes that I don't need anymore at a popular teen consignment store called Plato's Closet. I've never sold with them before, which is important. I was browsing while they were sorting through my clothes and found a very distinct pair of jeans that I lost track of a year or so ago. They're jeans that I distressed by hand and had a now former friend patch with Galaxy fabric. And she did a really crappy job at it, and also added a semicolon decal, which are the two most identifying characteristics. I found the video of me distressing them, and it was done in 2018. And when I moved to Idaho in 2019 for college, I lost them. I moved back to Texas in 2020. I didn't like them, so it really wasn't a big deal. But now they're in this store that is 1,500 miles away from where I lost them, and they've been there for 4 months max, according to the associates, since they cycle things out every 2 seasons. More weird details: they somehow had my old home address in the system, despite me never selling with them before, and the ID they used to enter me into the system having my current address on it. This can't be explained with someone selling the jeans in my name. You have to have a photo ID to sell with them, and when they scan the ID, it brings up the information on your ID and nothing more. And to top it all off, I have my receipt and order number for the transaction. This has been a very weird and surreal experience for me. Update: I went back to the same Plato's Closet, and they predictably were not there. None of the staff that was working yesterday was working today, and the lady at the counter kept giving me attitude when I was asking questions. I eventually left my name and number with them just in case whoever bought them brings them back, since, honestly, they were one of the most ill-fitting jeans I've had, and the patches weren't even finished. You could stick your hand right through the holes. I know they're not going to call me though, and I'm probably never going to see those jeans again. Or I might, in 10 years, in a different Plato's Closet in a different country. So, somebody else has these traveling pants now. Ever had something occur as a coincidence, but still leave you questioning if it really is? One thing about me, I'm a night owl and qualified postponer. I tend to do things when I feel like doing them, because to my logic, that's when you do it best. About 2 months ago, I downloaded lots of movies and watched them in the next week at a slow pace until I came to one last movie, Dark Waters, starring Mark Ruffalo. But, as you guessed, I postponed watching the movie simply because I didn't feel like it. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, I didn't mark the date, but everyone else was asleep. I decided to watch Dark Waters. Now, here's the juicy part. Ruffalo is in bed with his wife, played by Anne Hathaway, and wakes up to go somewhere in the house. The alarm clock on the side of his bed reads 2:37. Out of nowhere, I was curious, so I checked the time on my laptop. 2:37. Just a point to add, before that scene, earlier in the movie, I had paused it and gone for some midnight snacks and to go to the bathroom. This baffled me, because if I hadn't postponed the movie, the time wouldn't have aligned. I'm sure of that. Was I watching the movie at the right flow of time I was truly intended to watch it? And does it mean my actions of doing things when I feel best to do so are good? To follow up, this other time, I was back when I was supposed to go to get my ID, and my mom was always pressuring me to go do it, even on my 18th birthday. 1 month down the line, I felt I should go for it, so I did. There was a bunch of us applying, and there was this dude ahead of me. At one point, we just began talking to kill the silence. He saw my birth certificate, and we shared the same date, month, and year of birth. A coincidence? That's not even the juicy part. We were so surprised that when we started digging up each other's lives, turns out both of us had tried applying the week before on a Thursday, but the process was cut short by a heavy downpour, so we decided to return the next week. Again, coincidence? Also, both of our mothers, they're teachers. Does this make sense? Does it justify that I should maintain my way of doing things on whether I feel I should do them? Because as far as it goes, it seems to be good timing. Was this a glitch, or is it an advantageous hack? Has anyone else ever experienced this? Two very close friends of mine and me have often had long conversation about glitches in the Matrix, the world being a simulation, etc. And we've since experienced it about 3 times and thought we were going completely nuts. This one sticks with me because all 3 of us experienced it together. We had plans to get stoned. We were all completely sober when this happened. We planned to be together, and obviously, snacks were important. I got a fat bag of nachos and cheese dip, along with some cola, with, I don't know, let's call him Ricky, and headed over to Corey's, who live in a single-room apartment. I enter the room with Ricky, and with him holding the nachos and dip, and me holding the cola. Fast forward about an hour, Corey didn't score any yet, and Ricky had to leave. I lay down on the bed and asked Corey to pass me the nachos from the part of the table I had seen Ricky placing them on. And Corey goes, "What nachos?" I'm like, obviously the big bag of nachos in the corner of the table? And he just says, "There are no nachos." I get up to get a better view, and there are no damn nachos. I go like, "Just look under the table," and that's when Corey says, "I was wondering why Ricky had dip but no nachos." I then asked him about 1,000 times if he's sure he saw Ricky bring no nachos, and he says yeah, and that he was extremely confused there for a moment about why we, again, had dip but no nachos. So, Ricky and I definitely saw nachos going into the room, but Corey didn't. I definitely know Ricky didn't take them with him because he didn't have a backpack of any kind, and the nacho bag was big enough for me to notice if he would have taken it with him. We searched for those damn nachos everywhere we possibly could, even though neither of us saw anyone leave the room with them, nor did Ricky or me change the location of them from the table. This story really triggers all 3 of us because even though the thing that glitched is so insignificant itself, the way it did is just so crazy. All 3 of us know exactly what happened, but we sound crazy even when explaining it to ourselves. Okay, so my name is Daniel, and that's important to the story. It was late evening, and I was driving home on my electric bicycle, back home from a martial arts training session I had across town. I was driving without a helmet and with flip-flops. I was driving on a well-lit bike path by the road until I got to a poorly lit section of the bike path. I could have sworn the path was completely empty, but then I got hit by something or someone very hard and began to fly in the air. Mind you, the bike goes up to 25 kilometers per hour, so I got some serious air. While in the air, I felt time slow down, and I remember the first thing that crossed my mind was, I think I hit a group of pedestrians. Sorry, I'm about to hit the ground so hard and breach for impact. And in midair, I got into the fetal position to protect myself. I hit the ground and lights out. The next thing I see is me on my back watching a person standing right above me, and we both began moaning in pain. My muscles were tense, I saw him holding his other hand in pain, indicating that he got hit in his shoulder. After a few seconds, my muscles get relieved, and I put down my head on the pavement and fell asleep again. While being out, I had a dream, like a slideshow. I could see my mother first, then my best friends. I felt relieved, and I came to terms. Then, I hear a voice telling me to wake up. Wake up, man, please? Are you good? Then, suddenly, I opened my eyes and was feeling 100% energetic. Adrenaline, I suppose. I see the man helping me get up, and I got up very quickly, even too quick considering my state. I quickly looked at myself to see any damages. Okay, some skid marks on my hands and legs. Oh, I have an open wound on my leg, but I think it's manageable. Then, I looked around and saw my bike on the ground, and another electric bicycle. Same brand, even. Did I hit another biker head-on? I didn't see anything. Then I looked to my right. The man is sitting on the only bench under the only light pole around. The accident happened right in front of the only bench. I started walking towards the bench. I could feel how disoriented I was, but I sat down and immediately began to apologize to the man. He said to me that he thinks he broke his arm. I apologized again and asked for his name, and he replied, Daniel. I said, what? My name is Daniel too. When we had a brief chat and we exchanged phone numbers, then after some time I got up and drove back home. The next day, he called me to inform that he indeed broke his arm, but he'll be okay. I told him about my damages, and we hung up. I haven't heard from him since. I'm pretty sure to this day that the path was completely empty, but then I hit another Daniel head on, while he too was on an electric bike from the exact same brand, only to sit together on the bench with the only light source around. I think I either died or glitched into a parallel universe. This story takes place last year in the springtime, around April, I would say. I was working a midnight shift, and on the way home from work on certain days, I would stop at the gym down the street from my job. So, one day, I'm at that gym, and I'm on a machine, when I noticed an older gentleman kept turning around and looking at me. Now, I've seen this man in the gym very few times, but I had never seen him in my life prior to that. So, with him looking at me, I was wondering if we were going to have a problem. He finally approaches me, and he asked me, is my father's name blank? Like his full name, not just the first name. I'm a junior, so he said my name as well, when he asked if that was my father's name. I told him it was my father's name and mine as well. He laughed and told me that I favored him, which is something I'm told often by others. Nothing out of the ordinary so far, right? I was just assuming he was a friend of my father's and recognized me, or just recognized the fact that I was his seed. So, I asked the man where they knew each other from, and he mentions a fraternity at a college that my father never attended. I know for a fact he never went to that college, and most definitely would have never been in a fraternity. So I tell him that. The man mentions a church that they had seen each other at a few times. Once again, it can't be right, because my father barely went to church, and when he did, he was forced by his mom as a teenager. Even then, it was a totally different church than what the guy had mentioned. So then I tell the man to describe my father's appearance, and that was off as well. He described my father to be shorter than what he is, and bald as well, which my father has never been. That's when I officially knew we weren't talking about the same person. Something I forgot to mention, This guy is at least 20 years older than my father, so them being friends on those types of occasions really didn't add up. I told the guy that these were two different people that we're talking about, and asked again to make sure he got the name right. I responded that it is most definitely both of our names. We both agreed that it was an odd case of events, and went our separate ways. I've never seen him again after that, even with me going back to that gym multiple times, but I know this will be one of those things that stays in my mind forever. This happened to me about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, and to this day I still can't quite say what happened. I was in my room and browsing on the internet while I had a head of garlic roasting in the toaster oven in the kitchen. Then I heard my dad come inside, so I figured I could kill two birds with one stone and say hi to my dad while I went to check on my garlic. I walked out of my room and caught my dad halfway down the hall. I said hi and something along the lines of, "Hey, gotta go check on my garlic." My dad simply replied with a quick hi and walked straight into his room. I didn't think much of it and just figured he had a long day at work. It should be noted that our hallway is narrow and my dad is much bigger than me, so I passed my dad in the hallway. I had to press myself against the wall to squeeze past him. While I was in the kitchen, I heard the front door open. My dad's car started and he left, which I thought was super odd, since he hadn't been home for but a few minutes at this point. Again, I brushed it off and went back to my room. About 5 minutes later, could have been sooner to be honest, the front door opened again, and it was my dad. Except, this time he was loud and energetic. He came in and immediately hollered, "Is someone cooking something? It smells good." I came out of my room and said, "Yeah, it's the garlic, remember?" And that's when he asked me what I meant when I said, "Doesn't he remember?" I explained to him that he had just been home and told him about the garlic when I passed him in the hallway, that I had just seen him a few minutes ago and he had walked straight into his room. His demeanor immediately changed, and he said, "What do you mean? I just got off the highway and pulled into the driveway just now. Are you telling me someone went into my room?" I told him that I saw him go into his room. At this point, he was dead serious and went to his room to check for any missing items. At this point, he was under the belief that a home invader had come in and rummaged around his room. Once he was calm, I explained to him exactly what had happened, and even explained that the person I saw was even wearing the exact outfit my dad was when he walked into the house. My dad was about as spooked as I was. To this day, I still have no idea what happened there. At one point we thought that maybe my dad had an absence spell or something, since he's had times before where he's been driving and forgets chunks of time, although we couldn't explain then why he came in and then immediately left again, or how it was that my dad clearly remembered just coming off the highway before getting into the house, or where he could have gone in a few brief moments between when he first left and then arrived again. And to this day, the one part that still really creeps me out is just how close I had been to my father when I slipped past him in the hallway. If anyone has any ideas of what might have happened that night, I'm all ears. I grew up in a large family. I'm the youngest of 7. We lived with my dad and never had a lot of money. Somehow, I ended up getting the basement room with no windows. Actually, now that I think about it, I don't think it was considered a room due to fire safety reasons. It was like a big cement box with a door in the middle of the house. I've told this story before, and I get looks like I've made it up. I just can't get over the reality of it, and I'm curious if anyone else has had a similar experience. It was late at night, and I woke up needing to go to the bathroom. I usually slept with the door wide open and the hall light on, but for some reason, the door was only open enough for just a sliver of light to come through. I was scared, but I decided if I ran, I could make it. The room wasn't that big. I don't know how else to explain this, but as I began to run for the door, it just vanished. There was no light. Just pitch black in every direction. I remember freaking out, and I continued in the direction that I knew the door was. I began to feel around all the walls, and there was nothing. No opening anywhere. So I ran back to my bed and thought for a minute. The door should be right in front of the foot of my bed. I tried again, and nothing. It was just the wall. So at that point, I'm starting to freak out, and I began to scream. I start feeling all the walls walking the entire perimeter of the room. I had one hand on the wall the whole time. I was past where the door should be and felt a corner, and then the next wall. Then halfway on the third wall, getting back to my bed, standing on the bed while still running my fingers on the wall. Then I hit the fourth wall, and I was actually crawling on top of my long dresser, running my hand on the wall. The dresser was to the left of my bed, which meant I had to be coming back to the first wall where the door should be. There was nothing there. I don't know how many times I searched the walls looking for my door, but I eventually scared myself so badly that I went back to bed and yelled for what seemed like forever for my dad. His room was upstairs. He finally came crashing through the door, right where it was supposed to be. I had checked there so many times, and the mess that I made, it wasn't there. I was sitting up in bed, and I don't think in any way that I could have been dreaming, but I still don't know what happened. This happened a few years ago when I was in high school, but it still weirds me out. It was around 9 p.m., and my little brother, his friend, and I were downstairs in the living room watching TV. My mom was in the kitchen, about 10 feet away from us, cooking dinner. Everything was fine, and then suddenly there was a loud noise upstairs. I really don't even know how to describe it. Kind of like a huge bang, if I had to try. Anyway, I, being the person that I was and still am, ran to the front door and kept a hand on the knob, ready to run away if need be. My instinct to anything that scared me was literally always just run away. And my brother and friend just stared at each other. My mom walked into the living room and asked what happened. None of us knew, of course, so Mom went upstairs to check things out, while the three of us cowered downstairs. She was up there for a while, looking in all the rooms for anything that could have fallen or somehow caused a sound. And when she came back down, she laughed and told us that a shampoo bottle had fallen in the shower. I didn't really believe her, because the sound was way too loud to just be a bottle hitting the floor. I didn't want to scare my brother and his friends, though, so I didn't say anything. The next morning, my brother went into his room. He and his friends slept on the couch, so no one had been in there since my mom checked it the night before, and saw one of his footballs deflated in the middle of the room. He told us all to come look. Well, that was what we must have heard, I thought. I guess it popped? But then, why would Mom say it was just a shampoo bottle? I asked her that question aloud, and she looked confused. Well, I actually made up the shampoo bottle falling so you guys wouldn't be scared. I didn't actually find anything last night. I looked in here and I didn't see the football at all. We were all terrified after that. Little bro was convinced we had a ghost, but our house was built only a few years before we moved in. But really, how could a football randomly just pop? And then, why wasn't it there the night before? Never thought I would have a story to add to this sub, but it finally happened. And as I'd initially shaken it off, a strange dream brought me back to the moment that I'd experienced this past weekend. I was riding my bike down a long road with almost zero vehicles on it. I was in the dedicated bike lane, scooting along as I'd done hundreds of times before down this stretch of road. There's about 3 feet of open gap between the curb of this road and the bike lane, followed by the 3-foot wide bike lane, and then finally the vehicle lane. Vehicles are not allowed to park in the gap or bike lane unless they're the city maintenance crew that service the road, grass, and noise walls of this particular stretch. Well, this day there was a big blue moving truck parked right out on the curb, wide enough to take the empty 3-foot gap, the 3-foot wide bike lane, and spill over into the vehicle lane. I thought, no big deal, as there weren't any cars behind me and I had plenty of space to move into the road to go around it. The spot where the truck had stopped was the only spot on the stretch of road where the shrubbery from the other side of the noise wall was growing into the ground and out the other side. It sticks out like a sore thumb. But anyway, as I was going around the truck and into the vehicle lane, the door to the cab of the truck flew open forcefully right as I was about to pass it. I'm talking like the person that threw it open was trying their best to hurt me and waited for the best opportunity. At the last second, I clenched my teeth, swerved out of the way, and just instinctively swerved back into the bike lane and came to a stop. I was pissed off and full of adrenaline, so I screamed, "What the hell is your problem, bro? You could have freaking killed me," while dismounting my bike and making my way to the truck. Now this is where it got strange. There was no one in the truck. I went back toward it, and there was no one outside of the truck either. It was really just there with the door still wide open. There was nowhere that anyone could have slipped away. Those noise walls are there to spare the neighboring homes from car noises. They're about 10 feet tall and they stretch for a good quarter mile, with no open gaps anywhere. I went around to the back of the truck, and it was open and empty. There was nothing in it. No hiding spots. It was just an empty box truck and an empty cab. I decided to just jump on my bike and go home. I pushed it out of my head and considered myself lucky to be unharmed. That lasted about a day. I can't help but feel like I was in some moment in time that somehow got stuck. Upon remembering the occurrence, there was almost no sound. No other cars driving by, no birds chirping, no wind blowing on what was actually a fairly windy day. It wasn't until I got closer to home that everything felt normal again, and I was able to move past it. Now, it plagues me that I didn't take a photo with my phone or didn't look for one of those "how's my driving" stickers to report the truck. It's one of those glitches that I'm just gonna have to wonder about forever.